Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku can steal villain's power and got Harem, part 1. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Mr. Chubby Snorlax 619, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the video. Some individuals, it is true, are more special. This is natural selection. It begins as a single individual born or hatched like every other member of their species. Anonymous. Seemingly ordinary. Except they're not. They carry inside them the genetic code that will take their species to the next evolutionary rung. It's destiny. That is until something extraordinary happened. In the city of Quirk, China, a newborn baby was discovered that could emanate from their body. This baffled many doctors and scientists around the world. After that, people from around the world started to use strange abilities. Scientists couldn't understand why this was happening. However, one scientist could only theorize that the Quirk phenomenon was the cause of evolution. Natural selection. As time went by, the ordinary became the extraordinary, the supernatural became the natural. Soon normal people weren't normal. Now 80% of the world's population possess these abilities called quirks, while 20% are quirkless. One of them is who the story follows. A boy who thought he was quirkless since he was 4 years old. He'd been bullied by everyone and looked down upon because of this. Even by his best friend now turned bully Katsuki Bakugo. However, as time went by, everything seemed hopeless. The boy, Izuku Midoriya, found out he did in fact have a quirk. That could let him understand things, even very complex things. He could find any problem and fix it or make sense of it. Like a malfunctioning car engine, a clock, or even an advanced mathematical problem. He could even understand how people worked. How they ticked. And on that same fateful day, just as he was about to get mugged by some lowlife after heading back home from school, Izuku found out he could understand quirks and that he could copy them. All he had to do was just grab a person's head and look into their eyes. After doing so, he could see everything. Their dreams, desires, fears, and so many other things. And what made their quirk work. He could understand any quirk, its drawbacks and strengths. Unfortunately, at a cost. The mugger that attacked Izuku went limp. He left that mugger brain dead. A vegetable. His eyes are lifeless. Shocked and horrified by what he did, Izuku ran home. Like his life depended on it. When he got home, Izuku completely locked himself in his room, worrying his mom greatly. Eventually, Izuku managed to calm down and tried to figure out what was happening. But as he did this, he found out yet another shocking discovery. He had another quirk completely identical to the mugger's. All night Izuku wondered how and why. When he suddenly realized what his quirk could do. After finding out everything and making sense of it all, Izuku felt regret and fear, but what happened? What he did. So much so that he wondered if he should tell his mom and turn himself in. But something stopped him. Izuku came to realize he could finally achieve his dream. He could be a hero. Like All Might. If the authorities or pro-heroes found out what he did, they would lock him up or send somewhere he would never be able to achieve his dream. Or see his mom or Kaken again. He couldn't let that happen. So he kept quiet and tried to forget what happened. For weeks it tore him up to lie to his mom. To lie about him having a quirk, 2 quirks. It burned him a little to still get bullied. But Izuku powered through it. His plan was originally to wait until he graduates. So he could apply to the UA High School. The place where All Might and so many other heroes were once taught at. Where he could be closer to reaching his dream. Unfortunately, as time went by, he found out his quirk had an unsettling side effect. He craved more. More power, he needed more quirks. He needed to know more, have more. Izuku tried his best to figure out what was wrong. But as his hunger grew, he started to look at his mom, Kaken, and anyone with a quirk differently. He was afraid what he might do if this hunger didn't stop. He couldn't tell his mom or anyone. Not if he wanted to risk everything. So with a heavy heart he did the only thing he could do. He gave in to his hunger. But he promised to not use it on anyone he cared for or anyone innocent. No, he would target people who deserved it. The thugs, thieves, rapists, and other scum. No one would care. They didn't deserve such gifts in the first place. Izuku knew it's not what any hero would have done. Something All Might wouldn't have done. But he didn't want to hurt the ones he loved. He didn't have a choice. So, Izuku stalked the streets hunting and feeding his hunger. Thankfully he managed to control his hunger for at least a little while. He only had to hunt a couple of weeks. As months went by, the time for graduation grew close. And so was the time to apply to the UA High School. Sadly, on a normal night, the night he would hunt, everything came crashing down. When he almost crossed the line, when he almost broke the promise he made to himself. All because of his hunger. The people he looked up to and dream of becoming finally found him. Apparently his victims have caught the attention of pro-heroes and police. And that's where our story begins. Musatafu, Japan at night. It was a cool and calm night. Something that wasn't too strange, after all it was Musatafu City. Home to many heroes and where the UA High School was. Where the next generation of heroes would be taught at. However, even with all of that, crime was still a thing. And not too long ago Musatafu had a bit of crime. That is until something strange was happening. People were being found in a brain-dead state. Who were mostly thugs and other scum. Many thought it was a hero or vigilante setting up shop. But it wasn't. It had gotten so bad that many lowlifes and scum were leaving the city in droves. Not wanting to end up like the people who were found. The police and heroes thought it had to be a vigilante. But they didn't have any solid evidence. The locals and lowlifes came up with a name for this person. The Stalker. All things seemed quiet and peaceful. Normal people were still afraid to go out at night. Even though it seemed this stalker had his eyes on lowlifes and other scum. No one wanted to take that chance. Unfortunately for one person, they had to brave the night. The woman around her late or early 40s was walking home. She had long dark hair which was tied into a bow tie from behind. She was wearing a simple sweater and had blush marks on her cheeks. She seemed to have a somewhat frog-like appearance. She looked to be carrying shopping bags of some kind. This woman appeared to be nervous walking around at night. Especially considering the rumors she's heard. But she needed to pick up some stuff and medicine at the local 24-hour store. It was for her youngest daughter. She's been having a terrible sore throat and she wanted to do something about it, like any mother would do. Her eldest daughter, husband, and son didn't want her to go alone. But she convinced them she would be alright. Still though, she did feel nervous walking the semi-lit streets alone. It almost felt like she was being watched. Thankfully she was almost home. Suddenly a loud noise caught her off guard that made her gasp in shock and fear. She quickly turned around to see a bent and broken can rolling on the ground towards her. She started to shake a little in fear when she noticed something moving in the shadows. "Who's there?" the woman fearfully croaked out with a slight ribbit. She didn't get a response. Which only made her fear grow. That is until something small jumped out the shadows. It was a small black cat who gave out a soft meow. The woman breathed out a sigh of relief. It was only a cat. The woman softly said with a small ribbit. She then turned around to resume heading home. That is until she came face to face with something that frightened the daylights out of her. Standing a few feet away from her was a person. This person was around 5 or 6 tall. This person looked to be a man, but she could really tell because of what they were wearing. This person was wearing a long black trench coat and a black t-shirt. He or she was also wearing a light baseball cap, light gray jeans, and oversized red shoes. The woman couldn't see their face because of the darkness. But she didn't have to. She knew who this person was. The stalker. Who started to slowly walk towards her. "I'm not going to scream. If that's what you're hoping for." The woman shaking started in a brave tone. As the stalker got closer, he began to raise his hand. Suddenly the woman froze in place, like something was stopping her from moving, most likely the stalker's quirk. "What do you want?" The stalker remained silent as he stopped right in front of her. The woman was afraid, very afraid. But she kept calm as she tightened her grip on her shopping bags. "Please don't do this." The woman tried to yell out but couldn't find the strength. The stalker didn't say a word as he began to reach his hands towards her face. Not knowing what was going to happen, the woman closed her eyes tightly, expecting the worst to come. Her thoughts then went to her family. "Please, I have a family." That's when the stalker stopped. His hand was only a few inches away from the woman's face. When she opened her, she saw the stalker shaking, along with his hand. Like he was trying to stop himself from doing something. Shortly after that, the woman felt her strength coming back. "Run!" the stalker groaned out in a strained and low voice. Shocking the woman. Before she could say or do anything, a sudden unseen force pushed her away. That's when she noticed the stalker extended his other hand just before it happened. "I said run." The woman flinched in fear from the stalker's voice. She quickly turned around and started to run away. Like her life depended. Which it might have. Leaving the dark, mysterious figure all alone. The stalker suddenly fell to their knees as he yelled out in pain. He kept on shaking, like he was having a seizure or something. He then used one hand to tightly grab hold of his other hand's wrist. Like he was stopping it from doing something. "Why is this happening to me?" the stalker asked himself with a pain-filled voice. The stalker eventually stopped shaking, but remained in the same state he was in. His head lowered in what looked to be shame. "So this is the infamous stalker. I was expecting so much more." The stalker quickly got up and turned around where he heard the voice. That's when he saw a man. A slender man of average height with messy, shoulder-length black hair that partially hangs in front of his face with half-open black eyes. He had a rugged and worn-out appearance with a bored or tired expression. Probably both. He sported a ragged black outfit that consisted of a long-sleeved shirt and matching pants that were tucked into his boots. He also wore a utility belt and a rather tall and large scarf. He was currently wearing a pair of large yellow goggles for some reason. "Who are you?" The stranger just sighed. "Doesn't matter who I am. All you need to know is that I'm here to take you in," the stranger stated, rather bored with what was happening. "Now are you going to come quietly or make this difficult?" The stalker tensed up. His worst fears had happened. He had caught the attention of the pro-heroes. Maybe even the police too. He knew something like this would happen. He hoped that it wouldn't. The stalker knew almost every pro-hero in Japan. But he didn't recognize this man. "You really don't want to do this?" The stalker warned the stranger in a low and serious tone. "Please. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially a hero." The stranger gave a light chuckle as he smiled at the stalker strangely. "Sure. Like how you weren't going to hurt that woman." The stalker clenched his fist tightly as he glared at the hero, which only made him smile more. "You have a whole list of victims of stalker. At least 9 people, all of whom you've left brain dead. I don't know if you're doing this for fun or because of your view of justice. But it ends tonight." The stranger quickly launched a part of his scarf towards the stalker, who would have dodged or deflected it away, but something stopped him. Like he couldn't activate his quirk. He was too late as he felt the scarf wrap around him. He tried to break free, but to no avail. That's when he realized why. A steel wire alloy woven carbon nanofibers scarf. Never seen those before. Only heard stories about them. And who they're used by. The stalker started softly as he stopped struggling. "You're Eraserhead, the pro-hero who hates the media. Also a hero who could nullify quirks just by looking at that person. Quite an amazing quirk you have there." Eraserhead just scoffed. "Looks like this punk knew a bit about him. Unfortunately, such a quirk has drawbacks," the stalker stated rather seriously and in a matter-of-fact tone, getting Eraserhead's attention. "Your quirk is called Erasure. It's a rather powerful quirk but is useless when your side is unstructured and deactivates if you blink. It's able to nullify emitter and transformation quirks but isn't effective against mutant quirks. It also gives you one bad case of dry eye." Eraserhead was shocked. How did this punk know that? Only a few people know about that. Stalker's eyes looked all over Eraserhead. Like he was studying him. "Your name is also Shoda Izuawa, isn't it?" Eraserhead's eyes widened in shock as he tensed up. How did he know that? How did he know these things? Does he have a telepathic quirk? "Who are you?" Eraserhead asked, dead serious as he glared at the mysterious stalker with his quirk activated. "And how do you know these things?" The stalker stood there silent for a while. But just long enough so Eraserhead could blink. And when he did, the stalker just sighed. "Someone you should have left alone." The stalker suddenly took a deep breath and then blew out a large black haze from his mouth, surprising Eraserhead. Before he could tighten or pull his scarf, it all of a sudden went limp. Like it wasn't holding something anymore. Soon the black haze reached Eraserhead, causing him to jump away while covering his mouth and nose with his scarf. Eraserhead saw Stalker rushing out of the large haze right towards him. While still blowing out that haze put off his mouth. The pro-hero acted quickly and activated his quirk, shutting down Stalker's haze quirk. He was then about to launch his scarf to immobilize him again. However, Stalker saw it coming and with a flick of his hand, he pushed it away while midair. "What?" Eraserhead couldn't believe it. This punk had 2 quirks. Before Eraserhead could react, he was suckered punch in the face by Stalker, causing him to fall on his butt. It didn't hurt, but it sure surprised him. Stalker then quickly rushed past, running like hell. "Damn it." Eraserhead cursed out with a growl as he got up and chased after the punk. "Get back here." Stalker ran like his life depended on it. Which it did, of course. He couldn't get caught by anyone unless he wanted to lose everything he's worked hard for. He needed to lose this guy. But it looked like that wasn't going to happen. Stalker looked over his shoulder to see Eraserhead gaining on him. He was using his damn scarf to grab a hold of anything to swing off it. Like a damn monkey or spider. "Come on." As Stalker kept on running, he noticed he was heading towards an alleyway with a dead end, which made Eraserhead smile. There was no way out this punk was escaping. But Eraserhead stopped smiling when he saw something unbelievable. Just as he was near the dead end, Stalker performed a massive jump. So massive that he perfectly landed on top of the building's roof. "That's not possible," Eraserhead said in shock and disbelief. "There's no way someone can have that many quirks." Eraserhead quickly launched himself in the air and then he threw a part of his scarf up towards the roof. When he caught a hold of something, he used all his strength to pull himself up. When he got up on the roof, he saw Stalker running and jumping across the rooftops. "Shit." Eraserhead then resumed his chase as he ran after Stalker. Running and jumping across rooftops just like him. Stalker looked over his shoulder to see that he was still being pursued. As he was looking over, he failed to notice a fast approaching figure coming right at him. When he looked, he was too late. The figure punched him right in the face. "Stop right there, villain." Before Stalker knew what hit him, he was sent falling down towards a busy crowded street. With cars going back and forth along with people walking about. Something Eraserhead and the figure didn't want to happen. "Oh. Damn it, Kamui Woods." Eraserhead yelled out as he got closer and closer. "Catch him." The figure, Kamui Woods, wore a black unitard with a wood helmet, wooden gloves that reached past his forearm, a wooden belt and wooden shoes. He was an up-and-coming hero. A rookie. But that didn't mean he was weak or didn't have an interesting quirk. "Got it?" Kamui Woods yelled out as he summoned wood and branches from out his hand. They were heading towards Stalker, hoping to catch him and immobilize him. "You're mine." As Stalker flew through the air, he saw the wood and branches coming at him. His eyes analyzed everything from Kamui Woods to his quirk. He then sighed. "Would eh?" Stalker asked out loud as the wood got closer and closer towards him. But just as it was about to grab a hold of him, an emerald-like fire appeared out of nowhere and engulfed his entire left hand. "Sorry, Kamui Woods, but I got you beat. Forgive me." Then with a loud yell, Stalker extended his hand towards Kamui Woods. As his hand shot out fire like a flamethrower at Kamui Woods, who barely has enough time to deactivate his quirk and dodge the flames. "What the hell?" Kamui Woods exclaimed in shock. The rumors said he would have an immobilizing or telekinetic quirk. "He does." Eraserhead yelled out as he ducked down to avoid any flames heading at him. "He has 3 quirks." "What?" While he had the heroes preoccupied, Stalker tried to figure a way out of the situation. He didn't have a teleportation quirk to get himself out of here. He was running out of options as he got closer to the street. It looked like he was going to land hard in the middle of the road. He didn't have a choice. He had to use the quirk. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Just as Stalker was about to hit the road, his whole skin and face quickly turned into stone. Crash. Cars on the road stopped, and so did the people on the sidewalks. They looked to where they all heard that crash. And saw dust in the air. Then, like something from out of a movie, Stalker arose from a small crater he made. His skin is still stone. He started to dust himself. "What's going on? Oh my god. Is it a villain attack?" Stalker took a look around to see that everyone had their eyes on him. People from all walks of life, ages and genders looking on at him. Those in vehicles on the road stopped to get a look at what was happening. A few people were even recording or taking pictures on their cell phones. All of this wasn't supposed to happen. All Stalker wanted was to stop his hunger. He didn't want to hurt or scare that woman. Thankfully, he stopped himself before anything bad had happened. Sadly, he was still in a huge mess. He didn't have the right quirk to get out of this situation. Out of all of the ones he stole, he was still useless. "Look. It's Kamui Woods and some other hero." A random bystander called out, pointing up at a nearby building. Stalker and everyone looked up to see Eraserhead and Kamui Woods looking down. Right at Stalker, who sighed heavily. "Stop right there, villain." Kamui Woods yelled out in a very proud and loud voice. He then jumped down onto the sidewalk. "You shall not take any more victims, Stalker." After Kamui Woods said that, everyone began to talk and whisper among each other. "That's the Stalker." Did Kamui Woods say villain? I thought the Stalker only took out thugs and other lowlifes. Go get him, Kamui Woods. You can do it, teach that no good villain a lesson. Kamui Woods felt his chest swell up with pride. Hearing the people talk about him and cheering him on made him happy. Eraserhead shook his head with a groan. He really did want to catch unwanted attention. Especially if this reached the media. But he had to bring this punk in. He was too dangerous to let free. And it looked like Kamui Woods wouldn't be able to handle him alone. As the cheers kept on going for the heroes and the boos and jeers for Stalker, it was starting to get to him. His hunger needed to be fed. But the only ones nearby are innocents or heroes. Stalker started to clench his fists and teeth. He had to fight this urge. But he couldn't. He wasn't strong enough. Kamui Woods and Eraserhead saw this. Eraserhead knew something was up with this punk. He was different, he acted differently. Like he was fighting control for his body. And he was losing. While this was happening, Kamui Woods saw this as an opportunity to end this. Now is my chance. Kamui Woods yelled out as started to activate his quick. His arm began to morph into wood branches and shot out at Stalker in all directions. Stalker just stood there as the branches got closer. Then out of nowhere he began to smile like a maniac. Lacquered chains prison. But before Kamui Woods' attack reached Stalker, a giant and sudden kick sent Stalker flying. Right into the car. Thankfully no one was in the car, but it was completely totaled on impact. and Stalker laid there motionless on the bent and wrecked up front. Fortunately for him, he activated his stone quirk, so he wasn't hurt too bad. But it looked like he was going to get it for a while. Onion Cannon. The heroes and bystanders looked to see a woman with long, voluminous blonde hair curled into 2 strands and purple eyes with white pupils. And she was gigantic. Her costume was composed of a purple and cream-colored skin-tight bodysuit that is accented with orange stripes. Her bodysuit also had 3 peculiar orange diamond-shaped dots on the purple top that were located under her chest. She also wore a purple domino mask with horn-like protrusions on the sides. This woman was Mount Lady. An up-and-coming hero just like Kamui Woods. Eraserhead, Kamui Woods, and everyone couldn't believe what had just happened. Meanwhile, Mount Lady got off the ground, smiled, and did a pose. "Hello everyone." Mount Lady exclaimed out loud, proud, as she posed for anyone recording or taking pictures. "Your hero has arrived." Soon people started to cheer. Many started taking pictures of Mount Lady. All of whom were men. While Eraserhead and Kamui Woods were still reeling from what happened. Eventually Kamui Woods lowered his head in depression and shame. While Eraserhead sighed as his face palmed. "This is why I prefer working alone." Eraserhead, or Aizawa, as his friends called him, sighed. He then looked over to where Stalker was. He still looked unconscious. Thankfully Mount Lady didn't kill him. That attack of hers is overkill sometimes. At least we got the job done. Aizawa then brought his attention back to Mount Lady, who was getting everyone's attention. He shook his head in disapproval. While everyone had their attention on Mount Lady, everyone including the heroes failed to notice Stalker was beginning to move. "Thank you all, I just want to say that I've only been an active hero for a short time. I'm happy I was able to catch the infamous Stalker." Before Mount Lady could finish, before she and everyone knew it, a car door was thrown and struck her square on the face. The force was hard enough to make her yelp in pain and force her down on one knee. She held where she was hit and moaned in pain. Everyone looked over to where the car door came from and saw Stalker. Still in his stone form. He was standing up on top of the wrecked car while carrying another car door like it was nothing. He quickly smiled as he saw everyone's shocked and horrified faces. "That's an awesome quirk," Stalker stated in a very awestruck and unnaturally kind tone. His smile then turned into a twisted one as he eyed Mount Lady strangely. "I can't wait to try it. After I take it from you." Before anyone knew it, Eraserhead and Kamui Woods leapt or ran toward Stalker. With the intent to take him down. Stalker sighed once again. He just about had enough of this. "Stop!" Stalker yelled out as he raised his free hand. Suddenly both Aizawa and Kamui Woods stopped, frozen in midair. They were shocked at first, just like everyone who saw. But they quickly tried to struggle or use their quirks, only to find out they couldn't. "Can't use your quirks, can you?" Both pro heroes looked to see Stalker smiling at them. He then raised hand higher, which caused Aizawa and Kamui Woods to be raised too. "I call this quirk Pacify. It's almost like telekinesis mixed with your erasure quirk, Eraserhead. This is one of the first quirks I took. Pretty handy," Stalker explained, still smiling. He then motioned his hand to bring Aizawa and Kamui Woods closer. Which it did. Stalker leaned right in their faces. "Unfortunately I can't use it for long. Usually this is how I catch my prey, and I would have their quirk by now. And I will be home with my mom. No fuss, no muss. But you two and my morals made me miss my dinner. Now I'm going to have to deal with you two first before I feed. So bye." And with that, Stalker flicked his hand and sent the two heroes fast into a building. Aizawa was sent through a window, breaking it and sending broken glass everywhere. Kamui Woods wasn't too lucky and hit the hard concrete building's outside wall. When hitting the wall, a nasty crunch was heard and Kamui Woods screamed in pain. "Ahhhhh." This caused many onlookers to gasp, scream or run in fear. Children who were present held onto their parents and looked away in fear. Many women yelled or screamed in horror. Men just stood there helpless and afraid. A couple people ran away too. Not wanting to be next or see what was going on. Few wanted to be brave and help but couldn't because of their fear. As Kamui Woods continued to scream in pain, Stalker groaned in annoyance. "It didn't have to be this way. But you left me no choice," Stalker stated in a low tone with a light frown. He then noticed Mount Lady beginning to get up. And she looked very mad. "Please stay down. No more people have to get hurt. Please." Mount Lady glared at Stalker with all her might. "I'm gonna make you pay for what you did to them," Mount Lady yelled out as she leaped right at Stalker with her game fist raised. "You bastard." Stalker sighed. "Looks like this is going to be troublesome." He couldn't use his Pacify since he already used it. And overusing it would only hurt him. He decided to rely on his other quirks. "Here." Stalker yelled out as she threw the car door he was holding at Mount Lady. She quickly shielded her face, expecting it to hit her there. But she was wrong, as it hit leg hard. She yelled out in pain and fell to one knee again, giving Stalker his chance. "You're mine." Stalker quickly raised his other hand and balled into a fist. He then pointed right at Mount Lady, who kept on charging right at him. Just as she was about to reach him, he opened his hand and a wave of sound was fired at Mount Lady. That sounded like a high pitch of something. She immediately stopped and fell to the ground on her knees. Ahhhh. Mount Lady tried to shield her ears, but it was too late. She swallowed and screamed in pain. She began to get a bloody nose and was getting dizzy and tired. Something Stalker noticed. "That's it. Go to sleep. I promise you won't feel a thing," Stalker said somewhat softly as he slowly walked over to Mount Lady, who couldn't do a thing. "Forgive me. But it's either you or any one of these innocent bystanders. Please understand I don't have a choice." As Stalker got closer and closer to Mount Lady, the giant of a woman felt fear and anger, but anger above anything. So much that she powered through the pain and tried to attack Stalker with a massive right hook punch. Fortunately for Stalker, he saw the attack coming and used his enhanced jumping quirk to avoid it. He had to stop using his sound emission though. Unfortunately, while Stalker avoided the attack, Mount Lady couldn't stop herself until it was too late. Her massive fist collided with a nearby run-down building. She punched a hole right through the building, sending debris and causing the building to shake. "Oh crap." Mount Lady yelled out as she tried to pull her fist out of the building. While completely unaware she was sending debris down to innocent bystanders, who all scrambled to get out of the way. She kept on trying to break free, causing the building to shake even more. "Come on." Stalker looked on at the scene in shock. What was she doing? She was making the whole building unstable. He saw people running or panicking. His eyes then laid on a woman trying to shield her child from the falling debris, which caused her to get struck by a piece of debris that knocked her out, making her fall onto her child. "Mommy." The child yelled out as he tried to wake her up or push her off. But to no avail. Mommy woke up. Stalker didn't know why, but something clicked inside him. Seeing that woman get hurt and seeing her and that child in danger did something to him. Like his need to help outweigh his need to feed. That's when everything made sense now. He did this, he hurt the heroes and placed all these people in danger. He was the villain. Guilt and anguish filled his heart. Mount Lady was panicking, which only made her try to pull her hand out even more, only further shaking the building. It would only be a matter of until the building would collapse and then fall down onto the knocked out woman and her child. Stalker knew that he had to stop that from happening at any cost. He had to make up for his mistake, all of his mistakes. Finally, the worst possible outcome happened. Mount Lady pulled her hand out of the building. She smiled very proudly, but that smile turned into a face of horror when she realized what she did. The old, abandoned building began to break up and collapse. All of it directed at the unconscious woman, her child, and few others who wouldn't be able to run away in time. "No!" Mount Lady yelled out as she tried to reach and grab as many people as she could. But before that happened, Stalker rushed past Mount Lady at inhuman speeds. His baseball cap was gone as he threw it away, revealing his hair and face to the world. Stalker had messy dark green hair with black highlights, his eyes were green, and his cheeks had a few freckles too. He looked like a kid. Probably no older than 14 or 15. And that's not what shocked everyone. It's what he did next that did. Stalker ran right under the falling building and raised his hands in the air. "Stop!" Stalker yelled out, activating his pacify quirk. But instead of using it on people, he was using it on the collapsing building and debris, making them freeze in midair. Everyone couldn't believe it. This person, who attacked and injured 2 pro heroes, was saving people. Stalker then looked down at the people he saved with a stressed and strained expression. "Run." The bystanders were still looking confused and shocked. None of them bothered to move. "I said run. I can't hold this forever," Stalker yelled out. "Go. Now." Not wanting to make him repeat himself, everyone under the frozen collapsing building scrambled to get out of the way and ran for their lives. All except for the unconscious woman and her kid, who looked at Stalker, reaching his hand out with a frightened and pleading face. Stalker fell on his knees, his nose started to bleed. His pacify quirk wasn't supposed to last this long or hold this many things at once. But he had to. For that kid and his mom. He slowly turned his head around to look up at Mount Lady with a strained and pleading face. "Save them!" Stalker yelled out as he felt his strength leaving him. Mount Lady looked shocked at first, but quickly nodded. "Now." Mount Lady immediately reached out and carefully grabbed the child and his mother, who was starting to wake up. The giant quickly pulled them out of harm's way, leaving only Stalker holding up the fallen building and debris. The child he and Mount Lady saved couldn't help but look at him. It wasn't a look of fear or hate, but a look of admiration and gratefulness. The look that someone would give a hero. That's all Stalker needed to see. Everyone was safe except him. With a strained yet relieved smile. Of all the mistakes he's made. It made him swell with happiness and gratitude. Still, though, it was too late. With a sigh, Stalker deactivated his quirk, releasing the falling building and debris. All aimed at him. Mount Lady, the child, and many others could only look on in horror. Mount Lady quickly rushed to try and save Stalker. Unfortunately, she wouldn't make it in time. While everyone could only look on. Azawa, who had recovered from getting thrown through a window with a few scrapes and cuts, had jumped out of the broken window to look at Stalker with a confused expression. The same with Kamui Woods, who stopped screaming. The young man known as Stalker just sadly smiled as he looked up at the collapsing building and debris coming at him. There was no way out of this. None of the quirks he's collected the last couple of months could help. Maybe one or two, but he was too weak. He strained himself too much. This was it. The end. Maybe this is for the best. I caused so much pain and hurt too many people. Attacked the people I'd admired since I could walk. I deserve this. Stalker thought, still smiling, as everything seemed to slow down around him. His thoughts went to his mother and other people he cared for. Which was a really short list. Looks like you were right, Kaken. I'll never be a hero after all. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I'm not the son you wanted, I'm just a monster. Stalker then smiled as he remembered he saved that child and his mom and so many other people. Not bad for a monster. At least he would die knowing he did something right. And with that, the vigilante villain known as the Stalker closed his eyes, awaiting the end. But just as the debris and building were about to hit him, a loud swoosh was heard and Stalker felt someone or something grab him. Swoosh. Stalker opened his eyes to see what happened, and he was shocked beyond belief to see he was in the arms of someone. Someone who saved him from getting crushed. But what shocked him more was the fact who saved him. The person who saved him was an extremely large man with a very tall and overly muscular figure. He had short blonde hair with two distinct bangs that stood up over his head. His hair casted a dark shadow over his face, hiding everything but his deep blue eyes. He wore a skin-tight blue bodysuit decorated with a red symbol that somewhat resembled a Y. The symbol was designed with a white diamond at its center, with white lines connected to it that trace from the man's chest to his back shoulders. The lines looked to be trimmed with the aforementioned red symbol. The symbol appeared to have wings on the sides that ran from atop his torso before ending around to his back. Over his back was a similar red and white design absent of the white diamond. Large white patches with red trims covered each side of his hips before ending at his lower thighs. He also wore a gold belt that had a silver buckle with red eyes. His forearm sleeves were colored in gold that each had white lines covered in blue accents over his wrists. He had spiked fins on the sides of his arms, and his feet were covered in shin-length gold boots trimmed with white and red accents. Stalker knew who this man was. Everyone knew. This man was the world symbol of peace. He was the #1 hero of Japan. The same man Stalker strived to become. A true hero. All Might. Have no fear. All Might started with a booming and righteous voice. His smile was big and bright that would make his enemies fear him and give his allies and citizens hope. For I am here. Have no fear. All Might started with a booming and righteous voice. His smile was big and bright that would make his enemies fear him and give his allies and citizens hope. For I am here. An hour later, Musatafu City Police Headquarters. In a small cell, deep in police headquarters, the vigilante villain known as the Stalker was cuffed and heavily chained. Sitting on a metal chair next to a toilet and a small bed. That wasn't all. 2 cameras were also watching his every move too. Also with a heavily armored and armed guard, who looked somewhat nervous. The police usually don't do this unless the perper offender was a serious villain. Which the Stalker was apparently. It had been an hour since the incident happened, where Stalker lost control and had a fight with 3 pro heroes, easily beating them and having them at his mercy. An hour since he endangered countless civilians. An hour since he saved the lives of those he endangered. An hour since he was saved and apprehended by All Might, his hero. By now word would have gotten to the media on what happened and probably who he was. Stuff like that wouldn't be difficult for the media to find out. The police probably knew everything about him by now. They might be calling his mom and telling her what happened, what he did. Stalker sighed, making the guard tense. His life was over. His dreams and goals were gone with the wind. Everyone in Japan probably knew who was and what he was. A villain, a monster. Still though, deep down he was kind of happy. No one got hurt, well not killed anyways by his crazed hunger. He saved a few people too. He even got to meet his hero All Might. Even though he was the one who cuffed him and brought him to the police. But he was still a little down, more scared than anything. Not about him, well maybe a little. No, he was afraid for his mom. What was she going to do when she found out what happened? What he is? Stalker couldn't imagine. He didn't want to. As Stalker continued to think about his mom and his fate, a door could be heard opening, then shutting. He then heard two sets of footsteps walking. Finally, two people appeared from around the corner outside his cell. One was the police officer who All Might handed over to. He had a kind yet serious face. He was a tall man with short black hair and black eyes. As a member of the police force, he was wearing his uniform. He wore a signature tan overcoat and a matching hat. The other person was a sickly and very skinny man with angular features and long limbs. He had spiky, disheveled hair with two bangs framing the sides of his face. He had a very long neck and his eyebrows were absent. He wore some baggy clothes. This man looked familiar to Stalker, but he couldn't figure out why. Both men stopped in front of Stalker's cell. The officer was holding onto a clipboard and the other was just standing there, looking at Stalker strangely. Izuku Midoriya Aka, the Stalker, middle schooler for Oridera Junior High School. Age 14, mother's name is Inko Midoriya and father's name is Hisashi Midoriya. No criminal record to speak of. Well, used to anyway. And yet I only see one thing wrong on this board. You know what that is? Stalker, now known to be Izuku Midoriya, just sat there. With a look of shame, he remained quiet, making the officer sigh. It says here you're quirkless. And yet you not only showed you have a quirk, but you have 7. The officer started eyeing Izuku suspiciously. The other did the same. Izuku remained quiet, his eyes stared at the men with indifference. Tell us how that happened. And why you're hunting people with quirks. How many do you have that you haven't shown? Izuku just remained quiet. That is until he looked up at the men. Is everyone alright? Both men were surprised by what Izuku said. They looked over at each other. The sickly-looking man gave a nod to the officer who nodded back. Mount Lady and Eraserhead were hurt, but not too badly. A few civilians got a couple scrapes and bruises. The only one who was seriously hurt was Kamui Woods. He suffered a broken leg and dislocated shoulder. Izuku's eyes widened in shock, then in horror, as he lowered his head. Which confused both men and the guard. But what happened next changed their confusion into shock. Izuku began to cry. Tears began to slowly fall towards the floor and down his face. His expression was filled with guilt and shame. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Izuku sobbed out as he tried to keep himself together. The hunger I can't stop. No matter what I do, it's always there. God, I'm a monster. Everyone looked at Izuku strangely again. What hunger? The sickly man asked. Son, we can't help you unless you help us. Tell us what's wrong. How did you receive those quirks? Do you know anyone else like you? All these questions the sickly man needed to know. The officer stayed quiet as he waited for Izuku to say something. However, Izuku just sat there with his head still low. That is until he eventually looked up to face the man. With a very dark look. There's no one else like me. I'm a monster. Izuku murmured darkly as closed his eyes. Whatever charges you have on me, I'll accept them. Just please leave me alone. The sickly man didn't look like he was ready to leave. But before he could say anything, the officer stopped him, giving him a small shake of his head. The sickly man just sighed and nodded. The officer turned around to give the guard a nod, who gave a small salute. Both men were about to leave, but stopped when Izuku decided to speak once last time. I'm sorry to tell everyone I'm sorry. Izuku softly whispered out. Especially my mom. Both men looked shocked by this, then resumed walking away. However, the sickly man gave Izuku a sympathetic glance before leaving. Soon Izuku was all alone again. The guard and cameras watching over him like a hawk. He could break out of here. Use any one of his quirks. But he decided to stay like this. He deserved it. At least until the hunger came back. It always comes back. A monster, that's all he was. Meanwhile, Izuku wallowed in guilt and shame in his cell. The two men who had just gotten done talking to him were discussing recent events, namely about what happened and Izuku. So, All Might. What are you thinking about? The officer asked the sickly man, now known to be All Might. Do you think this kid has anything to do with you-know-who? All Might just sighed. I don't know Tsukauchi. That boy used multiple quirks just like him. So maybe. All Might murmured out with a conflicted face. Tsukauchi looked over at his friend worryingly. Still, what I saw that boy do. I'm still having trouble that someone involved with One for All would risk everything for innocent people. That boy saved those people without a second thought. He even worked willingly with the people he was fighting with. Tsukauchi nodded. Why would Izuku risk his life for a couple of civilians? Why did he care? From all the stories and rumors about the stalker, one would think Izuku would make an escape during the chaos. But he didn't. He stayed and revealed his identity to help and save people. Even going so far to risk his life. Why, though? What do you think he was talking about there? About hunger? Tsukauchi asked All Might. Do you think that's why he's after quirks? I've never heard of such a quirk before. That's when All Might stopped, causing Tsukauchi to stop as well. The detective looked over at his friend to see he had a rather serious expression on his face. I have only heard stories about it from my teacher and Gran Torino. Apparently a long time ago in the States, a man could take quirks which resulted in a hunger for more. How he got these quirks wasn't pretty, I heard. He was considered to be the first quirked serial killer in history. Tsukauchi looked shocked and a bit shaken by this. What was this guy's name? Tsukauchi asked, still reeling from what he heard. All Might just stood there for a while before he resumed walking. His name was Siller. Meanwhile at the Midoriya apartment. In a large apartment complex, in a small apartment. A short plump woman with short green hair that was tied into a ponytail on her felt side. Looked very worried and jumpy. She was currently on the phone talking to her best friend, Mitsuki Bakugo. Mother to Katsuki Bakugo, her son Izuku's former friend. The reason why she was talking to her was that she was growing more worried that Izuku hadn't come home yet. Something he's been doing a lot as of late. She was hoping that he'd stop by at Mitsuki's. Unfortunately he hadn't. Not in a long time. Thank you Mitsuki. I'm sorry to bother you. No, I'm alright. If you do see Izuku, please tell him to call me. Alright, bye. Inko Midoriya sighed as she hung up the phone. Her worries for her son and where he was were only growing. Inko soon found herself walking towards the living room, where she took a seat on the couch. Where are you, Izuku? Why have you been acting so strange? Inko wasn't a fool. For the last few months she knew something was going on with her son. She was a mother after all. She knew Izuku was sneaking out at night or not coming home from school after a long time for a reason. She just didn't know why. At first she thought it was because he was just a teenager. But that changed when he started coming home in bad shape. Usually he'd come home with cuts, scrapes, bruises, and even burns at one point. Inko thought it was because he was getting bullied. But that wasn't it. Her son was changing. He's been reading tons of books, magazines, and manuals. Some stuff that was too advanced for him. But he would finish those kinds of books in a few hours. He'd also spend hours in his room, isolating himself. Which only got her more worried. He's also been writing crazy stuff on a handmade manual he's made. Detailing quirks, their strengths and weaknesses. She's even seen her quirk on there. All of this craziness began a few months ago. When Izuku came rushing home, he locked himself in his room. Like he did something terrible. Inko tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't come out. Not for hours. Until he did. When he came out, Izuku acted differently. More cautious and curious. Eventually things went back to normal. For a while. That is until Inko noticed that Izuku was acting strange again. Inko noticed that Izuku would watch her or loom over her strangely. Like he was studying her or waiting for her to mess up or something. She began to fear him a little when she found him looming over her when she was sleeping. Eventually all that stopped. Right around that villain known as the Stalker showed up. Another reason she didn't want Izuku to be late at night. Inko heard the rumors and news reports about the Stalker. A mysterious villain vigilante that would stalk people at night. Usually bad people. But Inko didn't want her or Izuku to ever encounter them. She also heard that he or she would leave their victims brain dead. A shell of their former selves. Inko didn't want that happening to her poor Izuku. I should probably watch some TV until he comes home. Inko stated with another sigh as she turned on the TV. She looked to see that it was a breaking news report. I wonder what's happening. Breaking news, an hour ago in the middle of a crowded street. An unexpected villain attack took place. That involved Mount Lady, Kamui Woods, and another mysterious pro-hero. The villain that attacked was revealed to be the Stalker. A mysterious villain that many consider a vigilante who recently showed up these last few months. Attacking and leaving his victims in a vegetative state. Many of whom were pretty criminals. Inko sat up straight as she listened to the report carefully. She began to have a very sinking and dark feeling down in her stomach. She hoped her son was alright. The fight was rough and resulted in Kamui Woods and the other pro-hero being hospitalized. Leaving only Mount Lady to face the Stalker alone. During the altercation, Mount Lady unknowingly put innocent lives in danger. Thankfully no one was seriously hurt or lost their lives. Thanks to the Stalker, who stopped a collapsing building from falling on many innocents. However, he unknowingly placed his life in danger, but before anything happened, Japan's #1 hero All Might saved the day and apprehended the Stalker, resulting in his arrest. Inko gave out a small sigh of relief. She was glad not to get hurt too badly, or worse, get killed. She was also glad that no good stalker was behind bars now. That's one worry off her chest. Unfortunately her son wasn't back yet. Before Inko knew it, the news report continued, so she brought her attention back to the TV. Reports are sketchy. But the stalker was shown to have been using multiple quirks. Many reliable witnesses can confirm this. Unfortunately we are unable to confirm this for ourselves. On the other hand, after being apprehended we were able to confirm his identity. With cooperation from the police and pro-heroes. Inko just sat there waiting for them to continue. Not knowing she was going to have the shock of her life. Before she knew it, they showed the stalker in a mugshot. Cuffed and chained while having a guilty and shamed looking expression. Inko sat there, her face and eyes widened. In shock and disbelief. She couldn't believe it. Izuku. A little while ago at the Bakugo household. For the last time, I don't know where that shitty Deku is. Katsuki Bakugo yelled out with a vein appearing on his forehead. Katsuki was average height for his age. He had ash blonde hair and had red eyes. He was currently outside the backyard of his home training. But couldn't because of his mom. Apparently because Deku's mom was calling. Asking if they'd seen him. "Fine, you shitty brat. And stop yelling." Katsuki heard his mom yell out in the house. Katsuki just growled out as he fired off a small explosion from his palms. Boom. His quirk was called Explosion. It's an emitter quirk. It was a deadly and powerful quirk. That matched a bit like his personality. Katsuki growled again as he kept on using his quirk. The sweat he was working was helping him out a lot. This is how he burned off steam. And, as of late he's been so pissed off. The reason? Deku? Katsuki snarled out with a pissed off expression. As of late Izuku, who is called Deku. Because he was a quirkless and shitty nerd. Had been getting on his nerves lately. It happened a few months ago. One day he would remind Deku how worthless he was along with his friends. They would usually beat him up, and they did. But this time was different. He was almost enjoying it. Seeing their quirks in action. It creeped them out that they stopped bullying him. Lately that's all he's been doing. Sneaking around trying to see how people's quirks worked. Writing everything in that little manual of his. "I'm gonna destroy that little fucking manual next time I see it." Katsuki yelled out as he kept firing explosions. That'll show the quirkless shithead. Katsuki and Izuku used to be best friends when they were kids. That changed when he got his quirk and Deku didn't. It showed him that he was powerful. And that Deku and everyone else were just pebbles in his way. Deku was a pebble. An annoying pebble. That's all he was. With one last furious yell, Katsuki was done. After recovering his breath, he decided to head inside and hit the sack. That shithead better be home with his mom. Good for nothing Dumbus shouldn't worry her like that. Well, he didn't care about Izuku. Katsuki cared for his mom just like his own. She was kind and always smiling. Deku didn't deserve such a woman as a mother. Katsuki was just about to open the back door. His mom called out for him. "Katsuki, get in here now." Katsuki groaned out in anger as he came marching inside. Eventually he made it to the living room where his mom and dad were. Their faces in shock as they looked at the TV. Before Katsuki could say anything his gaze was on the TV. And what he saw he couldn't believe. Reports are sketchy. But the stalker was shown to have been using multiple quirks. Many reliable witnesses can confirm this. Unfortunately we are unable to confirm this for ourselves. On the other hand, after being apprehended we were able to confirm his identity. With cooperation from the police and pro-heroes. The TV showed the mugshot of Izuku in his stalker gear all chained and cuffed. While having a dejected and guilty expression. His name is Izuku Midoriya. He is 14 years old and is a junior high school student at Oridera Junior High School. He's reported to have been quirkless, but that appears to not be the case. Since many witnesses and pro-heroes can confirm he has multiple quirks. We are unable to reach Mr. Midoriya for comment. However, we are working on getting one from his family and authorities who apprehended him. Stay tuned for more information. No one in the room could believe it. Katsuki more than anyone. His mom was the first one to snap out of it. She quickly headed to the phone and began to try and call Inko. Katsuki's dad is just there on the couch. Still shocked. The same for Katsuki. Who still couldn't believe it. Izuku Midoriya, Deku. Was the infamous and feared stalker. The boogeyman to thugs and lowlifes everywhere. No fucking way. Meanwhile elsewhere. Word was already spreading about stalker Aka Izuku Midoriya. How he attacked pro-heroes and had them at his mercy. How he revealed his identity to the world to save a group of people from death. All because of the pro-hero's fault. How he risked his own life. Many who knew Izuku could believe it, some refused to believe it. Word of the stalker being a child reached many lowlifes and thugs everywhere. Some of whom had lost friends or rivals because of him. Now that he was in police custody, they had nothing to fear anymore. Some were even thinking about getting payback. Maybe by attacking that school of his or paying his family a visit. While that was happening, a mysterious large man was sitting in a large medical chair. While being hooked to a number of machines and other things. Couldn't help but chuckle at the news he was hearing on the TV. "Something wrong, master?" A well-mannered and serious voice asked in the shadows. "Does something about this bother you?" The man just chuckled again. "No, Kurogiri, it amuses me that someone could have a quirk so similar to Siller's would be around. And to be someone so ordinary too. And in my backyard of all places. Do you want me to retrieve him?" Kurogiri asked, still lurking in the shadows. The man sighed as he was deep in thought. "No, let's see what happens to this dear boy. Right now he's little more than an animal. If he does prove himself, maybe we'll recruit him into our ranks. But for now we shall wait." "Yes, master, I understand." Kurogiri said before a loud whooshing was heard. And Kurogiri was gone. Leaving the man to his thoughts. "I wonder, child, how will you end up? Will you be like Siller and follow his path just as he began? Or will you follow the path he chose after that incident? Will you become an ally or rival just like him?" The man leaned forward on his chair a bit, revealing his face. The man's face seemed to be made entirely of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though outlines of eye sockets could be seen. "Whatever happens, I'll watch you closely. Izuku Midoriya. I wonder, child, how will you end up? Will you be like Siller and follow his path just as he began? Or will you follow the path he chose after that incident? Will you become an ally or rival just like him?" The man leaned forward on his chair a bit, revealing his face. The man's face seemed to be made entirely of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though outlines of eye sockets could be seen. "Whatever happens, I'll be watching you closely. Izuku Midoriya." But Izuku. The last hour had been quiet for Izuku. The guard and cameras were still watching him, but everything seemed alright. They still got chained up like some kind of animal. Sitting on this metal chair was getting uncomfortable, but he powered through. Everything seemed fine, but that quickly changed. The hunger, it came back. Izuku began to sweat and shake. He hated this. He wished he was quirkiness because this feels like a curse if anything. Maybe if he had his manual and could ride on it, it would calm him down. Sadly, he left that back at home. "I'm in control. I'm in control. I'm in control." Izuku murmured as he repeated himself over and over. Greatly unsettling the guard. "I'm in control, damn it." The guard had enough and tapped their baton aggressively on his cell bars. "Keep it down," the guard ordered with a sneer. "Freak." Immediately after that, Izuku froze. Like he completely shut down. A minute later, Izuku looked up and smiled darkly at the guard. "No problem, officer." Izuku softly said in a slightly creepy tone and smiled. The guard flinched. This kid was really freaking him out. He wished that the next guy on shift would come already. He's heard the rumors about this kid and he doesn't want to end like his victims. The guard eventually eased up a bit and leaned up against a wall. This was going to be a hell of a shift. While that was happening, the guard failed to notice that Izuku was doing something strange. He lowered his head to hide that his eyes had changed. They changed into the eyes of a rodent, a rat or mouse. Meanwhile, outside in a dark alley, 3 rats were eating garbage and scurrying about, that is until they suddenly stopped. Their eyes slightly changed color into a dark red. Then, like they were ordered, all 3 rats began to scurry along the police station. Eventually they found what they were looking for. A broken and open vent. The rodents scurried in and were off to do what they were told. To find a safe exit and help release their master, whose hunger had returned. With All Might and others. Japan's one hero, All Might, was currently still in his sickly form. He was in a large office, which belonged to his friend Tsukauchi. He was sitting in a chair, deep in thought. He wasn't alone in the office. Tsukauchi and a few others were present with him. They were watching a small TV that was showing the news. And all they were talking about was the incident. "This is rather troubling." Nezu started with a sigh. Nezu was a pro-hero and principal at UA High School. He looked to be a small anthropomorphic dog bear mouse thing in an elegant suit. "It looks like someone has leaked the information we have on Izuku Midoriya. Which will cause some difficulties for us, I'm afraid, and for young Izuku's family." The people present couldn't help but agree. The people in the office, other than Tsukauchi, were all pro-heroes. Eraserhead, Shota Izawa, who had a couple of bandages on, courtesy from his fight with Izuku. His coworkers tried to convince him to stay in the hospital or take the night off. But of course he didn't listen or care. He wanted to stay close by in case something happened to Izuku. For some reason he was interested in our young stalker. For whatever reason. Namuri Kayama Aka Midnight, the 18+ only hero. Hisashi Yamada Aka Present Mick. Sekijiro Kansas Aka Vlad King, Blood Hero. Ken Ishiyama Aka Cementus and the Space Hero 13 were all there too. They were all gathered to discuss what they were going to do with Izuku and deal with the aftermath of the incident. We may need to place Inko Midoriya under police protection. Maybe even pro-hero protection too. Cementus stated in a serious yet well-spoken tone. Because of her son's sudden revelation, as the stalker, many might want to attack or kill her for her son's actions. Most of his victims had family and allies who seemed to want such retaliation. We should bring her here just in case. Few of the heroes nodded, except one. So, you just want to force this poor woman into more grief? Midnight asked in a harsh and serious manner. Her son is in jail and charged for being a vigilante and multiple charges. And you want to bring her in just in case. The poor woman is probably losing her mind because she was told on the news of all places that her son is in jail. For being a vigilante and having a whole list of victims under his belt, Cementus countered in a well-mannered tone. That still made Midnight growl in response. Her son is a menace that attacked and injured pro-heroes on duty. And for that he's in jail because of it. And because of him her life may be in danger. She's just going to have to accept that. Everyone in the room could tell this was going to get ugly. Midnight glared at the cementing hero with anger. You son of a. Thankfully before things could escalate, 13 got in between the two, along with Vlad King. Look, we're not here to fight with one another. We're here to discuss our next move. 13 calmly stated, trying to defuse the situation. Well, I agree with what you're saying, Midnight. Cementos is right. Inko Midoriya might need protection just in case. Alright. Midnight and Cementus glared at each other for the longest time. Until Midnight sighed and nodded. Good, so we'll contact Mrs. Midoriya to come down to the station. Just in case. After all, she might want to check on her son. 13 started getting more nods from his colleagues. Speaking of which, how is he? Tsukauchi sighed as he grabbed the remote to the TV and changed the channel. Which showed Izuku chained up with his head lowered. Unmoving. He's been like that for the last hour. He hasn't said much. The chief isn't back from Tokyo yet. So we haven't really got to question him. Chief wanted to take this one personally. Tsukauchi explained to the heroes. Even though that was a lie. Since he and All Might questioned him a little over an hour ago. But they didn't need to know that. We thought about moving him to a more secluded and powerful cell. Since we don't know the full extent of his quirks. We also have other prisoners too. If he does manage to break out. What's stopping him from taking their quirks? He's a complete wild card. Most of the heroes still couldn't believe it. How could a boy with such a mundane background and ordinary face be so powerful? And one of the most infamous vigilantes in Japan. Who hasn't even been that active that long. Still hard to believe this punk could have so much power. I still can't believe he beat you, Aizawa. Sure, you had those two rookies with you, but how could you let that kid get the better of you? Vlad King asked as he pointed at the TV. Aizawa didn't say a word, he just scoffed and looked away. Which made Vlad King grin. I'm sure I could have handled it. I doubt it. Everyone looked in surprise to see All Might with a serious face. I fought someone like that, with multiple quirks. Aizawa and those rookies are lucky to be alive. There's no telling what he would have done if he was like the one I fought. All Might explained in a dead serious tone. That made Vlad King's grin disappear. Everyone remained quiet as they listened to All Might, who looked at the TV. Why did he reveal his identity and risk his life to save people? The man I fought, he would have let those people die in an instant. Why didn't he do it? Everyone was stunned and remained silent, asking the same question as well. Why? Does it matter? He's a vigilante who's left countless victims in his path, all of whom are brain dead, even though they weren't model citizens. Izuku Midoriya is a criminal. Simple as that. Vlad King coldly stated, only getting a few nods. He's also an unregistered quirk user. Even if he doesn't mean it. He can't control his quirk or quirks. He is a danger to himself and those around him. He also attacked 3 pro-heroes and endangered those people he saved. It doesn't matter what good he's done, he's dangerous and needs to be locked away. While most wouldn't put it that way. Vlad King was right. Izuku Midoriya wasn't like most kids. He was different. He was dangerous. You are wrong, my dear friend. Everyone looked to see Nezu smiling as he watched TV. If we started locking people away because they can't control their quirks or understand them, then we would be no better than the evil we fight against every day. Nezu started smiling. He then turned to All Might. You see it too, don't you, my friend? Well, he has made mistakes. I believe Izuku Midoriya has untapped potential. All he needs is a guiding hand or hands. That's when he looked over to all his colleagues, who suddenly realized what he was insinuating. Oh, come on. You can't be serious. That's a crazy idea, even for you, Nezu. All Might just sat there stunned. Did Nezu see something in Midoriya that he also saw? It's true that he did feel sympathetic towards Izuku. But what he did was wrong. Well, he didn't have a choice. What he did to feed his hunger and gain those quirks was wrong. At least he had yet to take a life. In a strange way, All Might felt something towards young Midoriya. Like he saw a bit of himself in the troubled boy. Could it be that he was the one he was searching for? A successor? The way he saw him risk everything to save those people, that woman and her child. Even if it meant he would die. He didn't even hesitate. It frightened All Might to see so much of All for One in Izuku. Not just by quirk or quirks alone. But the way he acted when he fought Izawa, Kamui Woods, and Mount Lady. That hunger and anger in his eyes. It was like seeing a younger All for One. Still though, when Izuku rushed in to save those people. It was like seeing a ghost. Especially when he saw him smile afterwards when he was so close to getting crushed. It reminded him of what his sensei once told him. When you have to save someone, they're usually in a scary situation. A true hero saves not only their lives, but also their spirits. That's what I believe. So no matter how scary things get, give them a smile, as if to say, I'm okay. The people in this world who can smile are always the strongest. All Might remembered Izuku's smile and compared it to his sensei's smile. It was like looking at a ghost. If there was a chance for him a long time ago, a child with no quirk to become a hero, then maybe there was a chance for Izuku. Even though he's caused pain and trouble as the stalker, everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe Izuku deserved one too. All Might sat there for the longest time, deep in thought. Finally it looked like he was about to speak, but before he could, something unexpected happened. The lights and TV suddenly went out. Boom. Everyone looked around to see everything was off, even the lights outside the office. Many people outside gasped or asked what was going on. Suddenly a dim light came on everywhere, which was the emergency power. That only powered the lights and cells. What's going? Before Midnight could finish that sentence, a loud thunderous explosion was heard. That shook the building a little. Boom. Everyone almost lost their balance, but quickly recovered. All Might looked over to Tsukauchi, who had a worried expression on his face. He then looked to the rest of the heroes, who all knew what happened and what's the cause. And why. Locked down the building. A little while ago with Izuku. For the guard watching over Izuku, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. After all, he was guarding the most wanted guy in Japan. He's heard some scary stuff about this kid. How he left people brain dead. Well, the kid didn't look at it. He was dangerous. At least that's what the lieutenant told him. As the guard continues to worry or complain to himself, Izuku just sat there, his head lowered. So the guard and cameras wouldn't be able to see him using his quirk. One of them anyways. This quirk was called Pied Piper. With it Izuku is able to control rodents. He got this off some crazy info broker who found out his identity. And he couldn't have that. That crazy guy tried to blackmail him into killing one of his rivals. But Izuku decided to put an end to it then and there. So, that's how he got this quirk. Which he was using now to break out of here. He needed to get out here and find a quick meal. Then he can head home to his mom and explain everything. After that, he hadn't thought that much ahead yet. First he needed to break out of here and find someone's quirk to take. He didn't know who. But he'll get there eventually. His eyes were still like a rat's. Because he was controlling and through one of his rat's perspectives. He'd sent two out to find him a quick and safe exit out of this building. And he found it. But first he needed to cut the power. Which will make getting out of here a lot easier. After a good minute Izuku smiled. He found it. The place that powered this whole building. All he needed to do is tell the rat to chew through what looks important and hope for the best. He could use his main quirk to figure out what to do. But he could only understand stuff if he was looking at it with his own two eyes. It was nice to have a weakness with all the power he has. It made him feel human. Izuku then thought of a way out of here. Giving his rat one last command. Izuku turned his quirk off and began to use another. A recent quirk he got a few weeks ago. While not the most powerful or useful at times, Izuku had a plan. With a smile he began to gather sawdust into his hands. This quirk was called Sawdust. With it he is able to generate sawdust. While on a smaller scale, he could generate more if there was woods or other stuff nearby. But this would have to do for now. As time went by, Izuku had summoned enough sawdust. Now it was time to put his plan in action. His hands were filled with sawdust. All he had to do was ignite it somehow and try not to get himself injured or worse. After some thinking, Izuku figured something out. Arghhh. The guard instantly looked at Izuku and saw him trying to break out of his cuffs and chains. While using his stone mimicry, it was easy enough to break the cuffs off, but the chains were a bit more durable. Meanwhile, the guard began to panic. People in the other cells on the row stopped what they were doing to see what was going on. The hell is going on? Someone trying to escape. Better run, pig. The guard completely ignored the others and focused on Izuku, who had just gotten done breaking out of his chains. Afterwards, Izuku began to walk towards the cell bars and to the guard, who quickly raised his gun at Izuku in fear, who just smiled. Been a while since I've seen one of those pointed at me. Should tell you it didn't work so well for the last guy. Izuku stated as he continued to walk towards the bars. Please just let me out and no one gets hurt. At least I hope. Dead on the ground now. The guard yelled out with his gun still raised. I'm giving you 3 seconds. Down now. Izuku just sighed as he shook his head. This was going to be difficult. 3. Are you for real? Just open. 2. Seriously, you have a gun? I'm currently made out of stone. How do you think this is going to turn? 1. Izuku groaned in annoyance. Suddenly all the lights and everything else turned off. Boom. The guard instantly panicked. He looked around in fear. Suddenly a dim lit red light came on, lighting the entire cell hallway, which meant that emergency power was on, and that the cells were still locked and shut. However, before he could sigh in relief, Izuku was at the cell bars staring at the guard with a smile, which caused the guard to raise his gun and fire in fear, something Izuku hoped for. Before the guard could fire, Izuku threw all the sawdust he made at the guard and cell bars. He immediately ducked and shielded himself. Boom. Izuku softly stated. Bang. The guard fired his weapon. Unfortunately for him, the sawdust had reached him. The smallest bit of flame from the gunfire immediately ignited the sawdust and caused an explosion. Boom. The resulting explosion caused the guard to be sent flying, making him the wall, the resulting force causing him to cry out in pain. The explosion heavily damaged the cell and made the building shake a bit. Eventually, as the dust and building settled, Izuku got up and looked at the cell bars. They looked weak and damaged enough to break through now. With mighty yell, he grabbed the bars and pulled with all his might. The bars quickly broke off along with most of the cell door. Izuku then roughly threw them on the ground. Izuku then walked out of the cell. He looked down at the ground, looking at the hurt guard. He sighed and frowned. You should have let me go, Izuku stated rather darkly. His hunger was now in full control. He didn't know who this guy's Quirk was, but he didn't care. He needed to feed. Now. Forgive me. Izuku slowly started to reach down to grab the guard and take his Quirk, but he suddenly stopped. His other hand grabbed the other one and squeezed so hard that his stone skin began to crack up. I'm in control. Izuku tried his best to stop himself, but he couldn't. All seemed lost until he heard a voice and footsteps coming from behind him. Back away from that guard, kid. He's our ticket out of here. Izuku turned around and saw 3 men. One was a fairly tall man with dirty hair who was wearing steel refinery clothes. Most likely his work clothes. He looked rather serious and had his quirk activated, which was making his hands look to be covered in hot molten magma. The other man looked too small and looked like a thug Izuku would hunt for. His clothes were baggy and he had long dark hair. His quirk was also active. His right arm looked to be covered in metal, his hand looked to be replaced by a long and sharp blade. The last guy looked like the last guy, a thug. Except he looked more serious and afraid when he saw Izuku. His eyes were a strange glowing green hue. Most likely his quirk. Look, I don't care who you are or what you did, but we're going to use that guard as a hostage so we can walk out of this dump, the molten magma guy stated, causing the metal arm guy to smirk while the eye guy just whimpered. You kid. Or are you gonna get in the way? Izuku just stood there, like he was in deep thought. Then with a dark smile and hungry look, he clenched his hand, causing him to stop using his stone mimicry quirk. Suddenly a bit of black haze started to slowly seep out of his mouth. I think I have a better idea. Izuku quickly blew out all the haze he could. Soon the hallway was completely covered in black haze. Screams were then heard quickly after that. A little while later, outside the cell hallway, many policemen and women were waiting outside a large hallway. All of them in riot gear with shields and batons. All of them were ready to storm the door they all waited next to. The door to the cells where they kept Izuku and 3 other perpetrators and offenders who broke the law. This was the only way in or out. They had them trapped. What's the situation? Tsukauchi asked as he came walking into the hallway with All Might, who was in his hero form. He was also with a few of the heroes. Eraserhead, Vlad King and 13. The rest of the heroes were nearby but were checking to see if anyone was hurt by that explosion, since they didn't know where or how big it was. Has anyone tried to break out? A police officer in riot gear who looked to be a cat shook his head. No sir, we heard a bit of screaming, but that's all. We would have stormed in right away, but we thought we should wait for you and the heroes. Sansa Tamakawa said, giving a small salute. Tsukauchi gave a nod, telling him to be at ease. The feline officer nodded, he then pointed to the metal door that led to the cell hallway. We also couldn't do a thing because of this strange black mist sir. We are waiting for someone to bring some gas masks from the armory. Tsukauchi and the heroes looked at the heavy metal door. It had a small window, but all it showed on the other side was a black haze. The haze looked to be also seeping from under the door and cracks. But it was seeping enough to be a danger. Tsukauchi sighed as he nodded. Looks like they were going to have to wait for those gas masks before they could do anything. But All Might suddenly came up with an idea. 13, think you can get rid of that mist? Everyone looked at the space hero. Who nodded. Just leave it to me everyone. 13 walked up to the door and bent down a little. He placed his finger under the door which was big enough. Then activated his quirk, black hole. He releases a small vortex from any one of his fingers to suck anything and turn it into dust. Soon he began to suck up all the haze. Eventually the hallway filled with the mist was completely cleared, making it safe to enter. There you all go. 13 started in a rather happy tone. Tsukauchi smiled and nodded, his expression quickly turned serious. They had a man in there with 4 dangerous criminals. Alright, the riot squad got ready to storm the hallway on my command. Heroes, stay close if something happens. Everyone around Tsukauchi nodded and got ready. The riot squad awaited his command while All Might and the heroes got ready if anything went wrong. Tsukauchi pulled out his gun, just in case. Alright now. The riot squad immediately opened the door and rushed in. They were soon followed by Tsukauchi and the heroes. And what they found was shocking and a bit horrifying. Oh my god. The whole hallway looked like a battlefield. Slashes, burning parts, melting parts, and small craters everywhere. And that wasn't the half of it. The guard that was on shift was unconscious while leaning against a wall. He looked beat up, but not as worse as the other prisoners. All 3 of them were laid out in various places. One was lying next to the guard, while one was very injured in an empty cell. That belonged to Midoriya. The last one looked to be thrown against a wall so hard, he was stuck in place. Men, check on our man and those prisoners. Be careful, I don't see Midoriya among them. Tsukauchi sternly ordered, getting nods from the officers. 2 went to check on the guard while the rest went to check on the prisoners. A minute went by and Tsukauchi grew worried. Status. Sir, the guard has some injuries and burn marks, but not too serious. One of the officers said as he checked on the guard one more time. He's just unconscious. But we should probably get him checked out. Tsukauchi nodded as began to look towards the rest of his men. Status. One of the officers checked in with the rest of his colleagues. Then he walked over to Tsukauchi with a sorrow-filled expression. The prisoners are alive but have suffered major injuries. Unfortunately they appear to be unresponsive and in a vegetative state. Just like the rest of the stalker's victims. Tsukauchi, All Might, and the rest of the heroes were shocked. Tsukauchi was the first to recover and asked the most important question. Where is Midoriya? Before the officer could reply, another officer called out to them at the end of the hallway. Where the last cell was. Sir. Over here. Tsukauchi and the heroes quickly made their way to the officer. And were stunned by what they saw. You gotta be kidding me. Vlad King stated. All of them were staring at a large melted hole that led to the back alleyway of the building. Big enough for someone to escape through. How did he manage that? 13 asked. Tsukauchi sighed as he frowned. The other prisoners, he has their quirks now. Everyone still couldn't believe it. Izuku Midoriya, the infamous stalker, had escaped and had even more quirks under his command now. All Might frowned sadly as he looked at the hole. His thoughts went to Izuku. Where have you gone, young Midoriya? A while later with Izuku. In a dark alley, Izuku Midoriya was limping along the alleyway's wall. He was holding his right side with his left hand and he was clenching his teeth in pain. He was hurt. That magma guy got him pretty good. Izuku didn't activate his stone mimicry fast enough. So now he had a really nasty burn mark. He removed his hand and wished he hadn't. He could see and even smelled burnt flesh. While injuries and wounds were no stranger to him. Not since he became the stalker. This made him want to puke or cry out in pain. And that wasn't all he had either. He had a few cuts and a major slash on his back. Thankfully he was able to become stone before that happened. So all that guy slashed was his coat. The rest of his injuries unfortunately were real. He needed to get to a hospital or find help. But he couldn't. For obvious reasons. Makes me wish I had a healing or regenerative quirk. Izuku moaned out with a forced smile. Almost there, just gotta make it. After a good minute, Izuku finally made it to the other side of the alleyway. He then found himself in a lone street. It took him a while to get here. From dodging cops and heroes. But he was almost there. Home. Izuku looked up to see his apartment complex a block away. He could use enhanced jumping to get there quicker. But he was too injured and didn't want to draw attention. With a sigh, Izuku began to walk home. He knew it was a bad idea since that would be the first place the police and heroes would check. But he needed to see his mom now that his mind was clear. To explain and apologize. For everything. As Izuku continued to make his way home. Something shocking happened. Deku. Izuku froze in place. He dared not move or even breathe for the longest time. With a deep sigh and sad frown he turned around to where the voice came from. There, a couple of feet from him, stood his former best friend and now the main bully standing there. His face and eyes filled with rage. Hakken. Thanks for watching my video and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description, see you next time, till then sayonara.